In this video, we're going to be talking about web systems. In other words, how is it that you receive and can see a web page or a website on your computer that is hosted someplace else? And this is also pertinent then to what we will be learning in class as to how these work, and you will be uploading files to a web server and how it is then you can actually see what it is anywhere that you're at on any computer. So the first thing that we have to know is that there are two elements called the client and the HTTP or web server. The client is the computer or device, so it could be a computer or a phone or a tablet where you are accessing the internet and the World Wide Web. So with the client, the types of things that can be used by an end user to access the internet or World Wide Web are browsers. We talked about that in the earlier video. Browsers such as Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and Internet Explorer, or Edge from Microsoft, is one thing that we use as a client to access the internet. The other is mail clients or applications such as Outlook or Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail. Any of those are examples of mail clients. And another is FTP, which stands for File Transfer Protocol, and you're going to become very familiar with that throughout the semester. And what that is a way of transferring files from your local computer up to a web server. The web server is the other half of the conversation, so to speak. The end user or client makes a request via a browser, FTP, or mail client to a remote server. They either get information or send information. For example, when you type in a web address, you are requesting information from a web server. When you fill out a form, you are sending information. When you are uploading a file using something like FileZilla, you are sending information. Not just a single server though, it's usually made up of multiple servers that perform different tasks. The main server is the HTTP server. It handles some requests, but it also interacts with a number of other types of servers that the end user does not actually see. In some cases, the web server or HTTP server may need information from a database. Such would be the case from, say, an e-commerce site. Most large websites run off of databases, and even some small sites, such as blogs, also work off of databases. The web server may also need to interact with what's called a script server. A script server runs things like PHP, which is a language that interprets and works specifically with database servers. And it in turn serves up this complex database information into HTML as far as what it sends back to the client. Or the web server may interact with a media server, which is used to store videos. Oftentimes they are being live streamed, such as Google On Air, newscasts, there's now Facebook live feed, or even Netflix type services. Communication works using a couple of protocols that are used together called TCP/IP. It is often referred to as the Internet Protocol Suite. The first, Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, provides reliable, ordered, and error-checked delivery of a stream of packets, which we will get into, between the client or end-user device and the web browser. The second is the Internet Protocol, or IP. The IP is how those packets move about. They are delivered from the source host to the destination host, so from the client to the web server, or from the web server back to the client, based on IP addresses, which we talked about in the prior video. In the case of working together, TCP/IP, the Transmission Control Protocol, the information is broken down into several tiny packets of information and travels through the internet using IP, and the packets are then reassembled on the other end. The IP may split up the packets on different routes through the system. This is done to avoid or alleviate congestion. It also means that the information is most likely to make it through even if a node in the actual infrastructure goes down. It also means then that the internet in and of itself is very difficult to take down because there are multiple paths and multiple packets, and they each contain information on how to reassemble. Along with TCP/IP is what is called a domain name server, or DNS for short. An IP address is a numerical label assigned to each device. We talked about this briefly in the other video. Think of it as like your house or apartment number. Most common is referred to as Internet Protocol version 4, or abbreviated IPv4. This consists of 4 sets of numbers divided by a period, as you see in this graphic. Because of the depletion of numbers in the 32-bit number, which is what IPv4 uses, IPv6, so Internet Protocol version 6, was introduced, which is now 128 bits and uses a longer IP address consisting of the numbers. But humans aren't really good at memorizing numbers. Can you imagine having to go to a website that would be going, for example, go to 5423925.192. That's the IP address for Amazon. Isn't it much easier to remember Amazon.com? So in other words, what we do is we use what's called a DNS server. That's your domain name server. And what it does is it takes that IP address, that string of numbers, and converts it into an address that we can understand and is more readily memorized by human beings. So now that you've received a brief history of the Internet and the World Wide Web, and have learned some of the terminology and a brief bit of how the Internet and the World Wide Web actually works, think about the following questions and respond via Flipgrid. First question: what are some ways that you feel the Internet and the World Wide Web have influenced society? Think both of the positive and negative influences. And secondly, how has the Internet and the web influenced your life? And saying that you can't live without your phone is not acceptable. While it's probably true, I want you to think deeper and more in depth than that. Thank you.